Good morning, scientist. I am so excited you are here today, and I am so excited to be starting to set up our science notebooks today. And so before we get started, you're probably going to need to pause this video at some point to have time to do everything, but you are free to do that. Do what you need to do, but it's really important that you have a journal that you are able to make your science journal this year. So we're going to get started. All right. So first of all, what is a science notebook? Well, sometimes as scientists, we need to express what we're learning in a creative way, and that looks different for different people. One thing it does is it helps us stay really organized, and as third graders, that's something that we need to start being because we're starting to take ownership of our own learning a lot more. It's going to help us think really hard, and a word that we use for that is critically. We're going to start thinking critically about science and about what we're understanding. It's a way to record our data that we're learning, the things that we're observing. It's a way for us to remind ourselves so we can share with our friends and our peers. And it's also a way to self-reflect and kind of think about what did we learn during this time. We're going to look at a couple of real scientist notebooks so that we kind of know where to start. So these are some scientist notebooks of real scientists who actually developed different systems and inventors throughout the course of history. A couple of them we're actually going to learn about this year. But I want you to stop and think for a second. What do you notice about all three of these? I noticed that at least two of them that I can see have diagrams. They've drawn something that they found. What else do you notice? Yeah, it's really organized. Like I can look at it and read through it and I kind of know what's going on. And that's going to be really important as we develop our science notebook. So today what you're going to need, you're either going to need a composition book or a spiral journal. I like my spirals because when I am working in them, I can fold them around the spiral. But if you have a composition book, you're welcome to use that. So go make sure you have one nearby. If you need to pause the video and go get it, go do that right now. So we need those items. And then these are just some other things that you might need. We typically have these when we're in school because we'll have printouts that we're putting in. Right now, you're going to have to do some copying. But when you do come back to school, you'll need to bring your science journal. And so if you need scissors or glue and pencil, normally we will have those things. Right now, you don't need those, but you do need a pencil and your journal. So the first thing is we don't really have a cover sheet this year. And so what you're going to get to do is you can take a piece of paper, a piece of construction paper, and you can measure it to fit the front. And you can create your own cover page. Or if you have a spiral like mine, you can write on the front. And that's what I'm going to do. Mrs. Day's Science Journal. Now, I'm going to have time in a few minutes to decorate about science. But for now, this will do. It's big, it's clear, I can read it, and I'm going to know where my science journal is every single time we do science. The next thing I need to do is I need to open up my journal to the very front where there's no lines here, but there's lines here. And we're going to start numbering right here in this top corner. And if you look closely, you'll see that there's a little pink line right here. And then this blue line comes across. And that creates the perfect spot for a number to go. And I'm actually going to take my Sharpie and do it because I think it's easier to see. And I'm going to label number 1 through 50. My Sharpie is actually bleeding through, so maybe I'm just going to use a normal pen, but I want to make it show up. So I'm going to get a couple done, and then I'm going to show you, and I'm going to do front and back, not just the front side. I'm going to do the back also. So what you can see is here I was able to do number 6. Here I was able to do number 7, and that box is in a perfect spot. I'm going to do that number 1 through 50, 50. So you're going to need to pause the video right now. Make sure you don't skip any pages and back and forth 1 through 50 for right now. Okay, now that you have everything numbered, you're going to go all the way back to page number 1. This is going to be your title page. This is where you're going to get to decorate what science looks like to you, or what does it mean to you. We kind of did this last week. We kind of thought about it, but now you're going to get a chance to illustrate or draw about science. So here, this lady drew a pair of goggles, a graduated cylinder, and a beaker, because those things remind her of science. That's something that means science to her. So you're going to take a few minutes. You're going to have science written on here by your first and last name and then the school year. So if this was me, I'm going to come between my second hole and my third hole right here, and I'm going to write science real big. And then under that, I'm going to put by my first name and my last name. And then the school year is 2020 to 2021. Okay. And then I'm going to take time in a few minutes to draw a picture here. It's whatever science reminds you of, what you think of when you think of science, those types of things. If it was my son, he'd be drawing a mad scientist because he thinks that that's what science is. So now after you've drawn that, you're going to go to page 2, which is the back of that title page. Now it's really hard to see this, and I'm going to blow it up on the next slide so that you can see, but these are our expectations. This is where I'm going to need you to really take some time and write things down. Normally we would give you a printout, but we're not doing that right now. But if your mom and dad have a printer and they want to snip a picture of this and you glue it down, you can. Otherwise, just write it down best you can, just to remind you of what our expectations are for our science journal. So I'm going to take, remember I flipped it to the back of my title page, and here I'm going to turn it with my holes or the binding to the sky, and I'm going to create a table. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be neat. And my table has 3 columns, and it's got a row here at the top. I'm going to label it investigation, expectations. And then I'm going to have before, during, and after an investigation. Before, during, after. So you can kind of see it looks like this. Because I'm writing in pen, you're able to see kind of through my page a little bit, but if you do it in pencil, then you won't have that problem. So in our investigation, we're going to be going through that later, but we just needed to have that table set up because we'll talk about what our expectations are later. Anytime that we take a grade or do something for your teacher that you're going to turn in science, when we do an investigation, there's going to be something called a rubric. And a rubric just tells you how we're going to grade it. We're going to look at your neatness and your organization. We're going to look at the content, like what you're writing about, and if it's accurate, if it's true, if it's factual. We're going to look and see if there were some required parts and make sure that you have them. And then just like those real scientist journals, we're going to look and see if you have some illustrations and diagrams drawn. And so this gives you an idea of how we would grade that. So now you're going to go to page 4. Flip over to page 4. And you're going to have these reflection questions. And that's something that you can just write straight onto the lines of your journal. Reflection questions. And as good scientists, we are always asking ourselves questions after we complete investigations and after we collect data. So you're going to take time on your journal. You're going to write reflection questions up here, and then you're going to label it number 1 through 6, and you're going to write these questions down. So you're going to need to pause the video again so that you have a chance to write them. They're not very long. You're great. I know that you can do it because these are questions that you might be asked in an activity or in a seesaw activity or even in a lesson with your teacher. So go ahead and pause the video and make sure that you're able to write those down. So on the next page, we are going to write right next door to the reflection questions. We're going to write table of contents. And you guys, as smart 3rd graders, know that a table of contents is where you can find all of your information and know where to go to find things in your journal. So you're going to make your table of contents. Your table of contents probably needs to be one of the neatest parts of your journal so that you can find information easily. So we are actually going to use all parts of this page. And the great thing about notebook paper is that it gives us those margins, those little tiny pink lines. And so I want you to take your pencil or a marker or a pen and trace those pink lines. And that's what you'll see right here where that black line is. We're going to trace that, okay? And then you're going to write date on the left one, description in the middle, That's where we're going to like name our investigations. And then on the far right, you're going to put page number. And that looks like a little hashtag, but back a long time ago, that was actually the number sign. So you are going to make yours, oops, my line got a little messed up, right here, just like that. And then you will get a chance to fill this in as we go throughout the year. So now you've set it all up. So make sure that you have all of your parts in here. Make sure you keep your journal nearby. If you didn't illustrate your title page, go back and illustrate your title page. Close your journal so everything stays nice and tight inside, nothing falls out, and put this in your material bucket at home. And then whenever we come back to school, you're going to bring it with you. Great job today, scientists.